dude? Are you getting your subject matter? Does that get you in trouble with the tech gods, or do they allow you to dance?
So far, I've been allowed to dance, but I've been very careful. I have a paid subscription, so anytime I get into anything that I, think YouTube would hit me for or flag me for, I just kind of separate that content for those members. So far, so good.
That's great, man. I'm super happy for you. How long's your podcast been going?
11 months.
Wow, that's awesome, dude. Brand new. Congratulations. Enjoy the journey, man. So, where do you want to begin?
I just finished a book. I'm in the process of publishing it now. It's called The Epic of Esau. And I was going to talk to you guys about that. And basically, there's a lot of hairy, quote unquote, men in the Bible that we overlook. And one of them is Esau. And so as I got to studying this guy, looking through the book of Jasher and just some of these other books, I found this really great story of this, enigmatic character, but it's like broken up in puzzle pieces throughout all these different books. So as I discovered it and put it all together, man, this is a pretty epic tale that I thought a lot of people needed to hear.
I'm totally down with it, man. We were just talking some Christianity in between my desire to become the best Christian I can, and I'm just struggling with, like, I just don't know the rules sometimes, and it's so I always enjoy talking about it. So thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate it. So where do you want to kick it off?
Well, I guess with the introduction of Esau in the biblical text, and Esau is one of those characters that you don't hear a whole lot about. You get just like basically a little blurb about him and it moves on. It's kind of like the Genesis 6 event. You hear, there was the sons of God came down and bred with the daughters of men, creating Nephilim giants, and the giants were on the earth in those days before and after, and boom, it's over. Well, the thing is they only give those little blurbs because there was so much other material written down and so much oral tradition surrounding, these giants. So the author felt that subject was well covered. So they didn't need to, theoretically beat a dead horse, so to speak. And Esau is one of those characters. What he's most known for is the trading of his birthright, that he's the elder brother of a set of twins, and he trades his birthright for a bowl of red stew. But I grew up in church my whole life, and it's not till maybe 2012 I found out there's so many misunderstood, hidden, and redacted things in the Bible. And honestly, the Bible is the most supernatural book in the world. It's full of Bigfoots, vampires, just cryptids and supernatural warfare and things like that. It would put any kind of Marvel comic book to shame.
That's what I've been saying, dude. Like, why? Like, it's done on purpose to get you not to read this book, to make it seem dry and unfun. And I'm just telling you, regardless of whether you're a Christian or you're an atheist or whatever you are, it's a really interesting book. Like I said, on my website, SamTripoli.com, I sit down with friends of mine and we listen to Johnny Cash read the Bible. And it is fire, bro. It is fire. Every time you read, you're like, this is fire, dude.
So I don't get it. My parents obviously wanted me to be Catholic, but like you said, what they gave me was pretty, I would say, pretty dull, pretty blah. You want your kids to be Christian.
What?
Pretty dull. Pretty blah, like
okay.
blah. I was like, like this is it. I get it, but there's no, you want your kids to be Christian, right? Are you not going to give them these books and be like, look, it's interesting, or would you save that for later? Is it too soon to, like, you get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I mean, like, that's a great question, dude. I want my kids to grow up. Yeah, obviously, I would love for them to have a connection with Christ and all that. I really would. I really want them to. But I would just think it like it'd be so cool to teach them the Bible through a supernatural, like he's talking about. Like,
if I would have
how
learned
much more fun would that be, dude? How much more fun would that be? Than
We need a biblical graphic novel is what we need. You know, the comic book version of the Bible.
Dude,
Now, that's what I'm talking about.
And that worldview would help people defend their faith too, because one of the main key points of the supernatural worldview of the Bible is Deuteronomy 32. And that's the Tower of Babel event, because nowadays you have so many atheists say, well, if your God is real, how come there's so much violence? How come my niece was raped from the time she was 6 years old and da-da-da, and name all these atrocities? And they're like, well, if your God is real, then he's just a shitty God. And I don't want no part of it. It's because, the Tower of Babel was more than just a tall tower. It says there in Deuteronomy 32, it says that when the tongues were divided, also mankind was divided amongst the sons of God. And that in Hebrew is B'nai Ha Elohim. Every time that phrase is used, it's talking about divine heavenly beings. It's the same phrase that's used in the Genesis 6 event. So God there allotted his sons, which ended up being rebellious sons, over the nations to rule over them. And that's why you get to Psalms 82. He's calling these guys out for rebelling and ruling unjustly, because it says, you are gods, all of you, sons of the Most High. But how long will you rule unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? So once again, this is a Game of Thrones. You have all these pieces of earth separated in dominions, and you have all these archons, these sons of God ruling over them, and they're ruling unjustly.
Yeah, man, that just totally resonated with me, because I feel like what you just said there about like supporting the wicked, those were your exact words, but along the line that I see that playing out right now so much in life, and like things I just, you read the Bible, or you hear the audio book of the Bible, and then it just instantly you see where it's playing out right now in the world. That's the thing that just really blows my mind about the whole thing. Is about how it all plays. You could see it playing out right there with it in front of you.
Yeah, and that's the whole story of the Bible, because when you get that Deuteronomy 32 worldview, that divine counsel worldview, it's an actual spiritual game of risk. It's a battle between the forces of good and the forces of darkness over the dominion of the earth and the souls of its inhabitants. And that's why in that Deuteronomy 32, it says, he gives all these portions out, but he says, but Jacob, Israel, is my allotted portion. And then that's why right after you see him pull out and call out Abraham. And what's the first thing he tells Abraham? He says, through your name, all nations shall be blessed. And what he was talking about was the bloodline, the coming of the Messiah. And when Jesus come, he proclaimed a kingdom that was not of this earth. So it's basically telling us that we have the right to revoke our citizenship from these fallen entities that are ruling over us and pulling the strings of the world leaders, and apply for citizenship to his kingdom. And it's just a story of all coming back into the family of God. It's a story about family and returning home.
I'm just telling you, bro. It's like I had a conversation with my buddy, and I go, yeah, it's God versus fallen angels. And he's like, it's not God versus fallen angels. It's fallen angels waging war against God's greatest creation, right? That's kind of a better way to say it. Like, because God is above all things, regardless of what your God is. My God is Christian God, but like that is the genesis of every single conspiracy comes from that. It all starts with simple fallen angels get cast from heaven, and everything goes just is haywire from there. Mm-hmm. It's so crazy. Jared, any thoughts? You're sitting quietly.
This is fascinating, and I totally agree. And it all makes sense to me.
So let's go. Yeah, man. So keep going, dude. It's supernatural in the Bible. I love this.
And the thing is, too, is this all comes back to, in the words of L.A. Marzulli, everything hinges on Genesis 3:15. It's all about the seed war. And then you have the parable of the wheat and the tares. That's what it's talking about. Yes, it has literal meanings, but it has deeper esoteric meanings also. Scripture is like an onion. It has multiple layers. You just have to peel them back and dig in and find them. Because in that parable, what does it say? It says that a landowner planted some seed, and in his absence, the adversary came in and sown his seed, and amongst the wheat was growing tares, and that's just another word for weed. And when you look at them side by side, they're identical. You can't even tell which is which until harvest time comes. And then the angels, it's not the angels in the parable, it's the workers. The workers asked the landowner, shall we pull up the tares? And the landowner says, no, lest you ruin the wheat in pulling them up and derooting them. No, let them grow beside, and come harvest time, we will separate the wheat and the tares and throw the tares into the fire. That's talking about this seed war, this serpent seed, and these Nephilim that are, in my opinion, amongst us today.
I totally
And this
agree.
story that I'm talking about is basically pretty close to the genesis of that seed war, I do believe. Because when we have Esau in Genesis 25:22, it says, the children struggled together within her, so she inquired of the Lord. And in verse 23, it says, the Lord said, 2 nations are in your womb. 2 peoples from within you shall be divided, and the one shall be stronger than the other. So now if we think back to Genesis 3, that's the event in the Bible of the apple, the fall of Adam and Eve. So once they've done rebelled, God comes down and gives the cursings. Well, so in verse 14, it says, the Lord God said to the serpent, because you have done this, cursed are you above all livestock and above all beasts of the fields. On your belly you shall go, dust you shall eat all the days of your life. And here's the key. He says, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. So a lot of people want to dance around and talk about, allegories and symbolism. It says plainly right there that he has a seed, she has a seed, and that they will be at enmity with one another. And of course, when it talks about the woman's seed crushing the head, ultimately, that's talking about Christ. And then that's pretty, openly accepted. But later, it says that once they do this, they realize they're naked, and they sew the fig leaves. Well, when you go down to verse 20, it says, the man called his wife Eve because she was the mother of all living. And the Lord God made for Adam and for his wife garments of skin and clothed them. And for those that's not familiar, Mike Heiser, great scholar, he's now no longer with us, but he wrote an amazing book called The Unseen Realm. And that, honestly, is what opened my eyes to a whole new book, even though I've read this book my whole life up until I was, in my mid-20s. And there were so many things there that I just didn't see and misunderstood or was just taught wrong. And one of the things he touches on is the word serpent. Are any of you guys familiar with this, Mike Heiser and the serpent?
Why do I feel like I heard of it? But to be honest with you, no.
Okay. But this word in Hebrew is nakash. Now, nakash can mean serpent, but the Hebrew language, just like English or any other language, one word can have multiple meanings. So the context of how it fits into the sentence is just key. So not only can this word mean serpent, it can also mean the shining one, or the one who practices divination. So if you have this supernatural worldview, God's divine counsel, in your mind you need to think of Zeus and the Olympians. That's how the Bible paints heaven and God, that he is the head Elohim, the creator, but he has a divine assembly with him. So when you look at the context of the fall of Adam and Eve, what makes more sense? A talking snake or a divine being on God's holy mountain that rebelled?
That's crazy,
you know?
right?
Yeah. Number one, snakes don't talk. Number two, when the snake spoke to her, she wasn't freaked out and she never questioned it. She trusted it. So to me, it shows that she's seen this thing every day, conversed with it, and obviously trusted it.
That's an interesting point.
Yeah. I mean, if a snake talked to you, would you just
You'd
be like, oh,
what
interesting?
the fuck?
Yeah.
What is this? This thing
Like,
is talking to me.
who dosed me, right?
Yeah.
Do you think they purposely put these wrong interpretations of these words in the Bible to sort of demean the Bible and make people be, because that's like a common thing that, like, okay, obviously she didn't talk to a snake, and that makes it sort of promotes like an atheism society that kind of shuns the Bible as something stupid. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think it could just be like a simple mistranslation, or it could have been like they were trying their best to put it in context, because we do have references to serpents. And then also when you look into the Mesopotamian and Assyrian culture, you know, that they grew up and around, they had serpents and chaos dragons in their creation myths and things like that.
Bro.
So they might have just went with that.
Chaos dragons? How come I'm 51 years old and this is the first time I've heard of chaos dragons?
Why isn't that our logo?
Why? Why? Is that a logo? Is that like, dude, no more Fat Dragon Productions. It's Chaos Dragon Productions, dude. When you real quick, when you go into the serpent, when you kind of take a look at like the story of St. Patrick, you know, and he's like, they ran out the snakes. They're not talking about snakes. They're talking about pagans. And regardless of what you think of that's a discussion on genocide right there. They're discussing genocide.
Yeah.
And so if that's the discussion about snakes there, why couldn't this be also the presentation, especially when you get into the role of the Vatican and the Roman Catholic Church in so much of this kind of reworking Christianity into a different way? Like not the Christianity necessarily of Jesus, but the Christianity that they wanted Christians to study. So if you connect those two, that totally makes sense. That's something else than an actual snake.
Yeah, and to obfuscate bloodlines, you know, I've seen you recently spoke with Gary Wayne, the Royals. Of course they want to hide this serpent seed lineage. Yep.
And who else we just talked to was right along the lines of that. That's just like these we just did the episode on the Anunnaki bloodlines.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. And all this stuff goes back to this serpent seed in this event in Genesis 3:15.
Yeah, it's crazy, dude. Yeah. I mean, it's resonating for sure.
And this is really going to blow your guys' mind, because once again, when you go back to the Hebrew, the original languages, here's where things really open up and your eyes start seeing things in a whole new way. It's like you never seen the blue Honda Civic until you bought the Honda Civic, and then you see it everywhere, you know. But when it talks about the cloth, the clothing that he gave them, when you go to Hebrew, this word cloths is hilbish. So, you know, God hilbishes their nakedness. So,
dude, sounds like you say God heals bitches, and I'm like, of their nakedness. I'm like, okay, dude. I mean, that lines up.
Yes, it's the twang. Sorry.
Yeah, respect.
But he covers their nakedness with a kanonet in Hebrew, and this is another word that's transcribed a lot in the Old Testament as tunic. And so this word here, you see it associated with the priest and the tabernacle most often. Exodus chapter 29 and verse 28 is where you get the description of all the things that are going inside the tabernacle and the clothes that covers the priests. And it says specifically in there that the garments were made to to Hilbish them. So it's basically using the law first mentioned to draw back to this event in the garden. And all rabbis trace their lineage and their beginnings back to Adam. They say Adam was the first king and priest of all creation.
Wow.
So, yeah. And this all ties in if you go to Ezekiel 28. And Ezekiel 28, and once again, this goes back to the Tower of Babel, how, you even talk about in your show the dark forces that are behind the world leaders pulling the strings. This was an ancient idea also. This is not nothing new. Solomon said it. Nothing new is under the sun. In this book here, this prophet is calling out the king of Tyre. And he's calling him out for all of his wicked deeds and stuff. And you can tell it's addressed to a man and this king of Tyre. But halfway through, it changes. And he's no longer talking to a man. He's talking to a spiritual entity. And I believe that spiritual entity, and many others do too, I'm not alone in this, that it was Satan himself. And I'd like to just go through and read that real quick.
Wow.
Yeah, so verse 13, it says, "You were in Eden, the garden of God." So right away, we know this king of Tyre was not in Eden. They're not talking about the same person anymore. He's calling out the spirit like an exorcism that's behind this ruler. And he says, "Every precious stone was your covering. Sardis, topaz, diamond, beryl, onyx, jasper, sapphire, emerald, and carbuncle, and crafted in gold was your settings and your engravings. And on the day you were created, they were prepared. You were an anointed guardian cherub. I placed you on the holy mountain of God, and in the midst of the stones of fire you walked. You were blameless in your ways." It goes on and on and on. This is clearly not a human anymore. And it goes on down into verse 18. It says, "By the multitude of your iniquities and in the unrighteousness of your trade, you profaned your sanctuaries, and that I threw you from the mountain of God as a profane thing." So this word Nakash can mean shining one. And just right here, we have this garment described, all these different colored stones, gold engravings, and all this stuff, right? This even fits the description of his name. He would definitely be a shining one with this garment on. And it's the exact same garment that is described in Exodus that the priests wore. They call it the ephod. So it's my opinion that I've developed from reading this is that Satan was once the high priest of all creation. And when he rebelled and caused Adam and Eve to fall here, he was cursed by God. And he was stripped of his position, and his garments, his priestly garments, were taken away and given to Adam and Eve. And Adam became the first king and priest of all creation. And so if you think of that, that alone would make Satan just hate mankind, because something that was his prized possession, something he wore with pomp and he was just so proud of, it was a symbol of his authority, is now the constant reminder of his shame and fall and having to see it on his younger brother, mankind. Because if you look at it in the family aspect, these angelic hosts, according to the book of Job, says that they were there at the site of creation. In Job, it says that, "Where were you when I hung the stars? Where were you when I did this and did that?" And it said, "In the morning stars, the sons of God sang with joy at the site of creation." So they are our elder brothers.
So there's a lot to unpack here. We've gone through a lot. I find very interesting the city of Tyre. That's a big, you hear that city a lot. We've also heard that from somebody like Ian Ferguson, who came on from, he's more into astrology and stuff like that. And he talked about the importance of Tyre and its part in the war between, let's say, the globalists versus Russia, why they hate Russia. Alexander, he invaded, Tyre was the most fortified city out there. And that to me is, I think, the genesis of all of that. But you brought up something very interesting I got to ask. So you say that Satan was in charge of creation. What do you mean by that?
I said he was the high priest of creation. It's like he was the one that overseen it all, because when you get to Ezekiel 28, that's talking to Satan, it describes his garments, and it describes the priestly ephod to a T. And then it says that he profaned his sanctuaries, but then he was cast as a profane thing from the Garden of Eden. So it was like, it describes him in a priestly role. But then as you go through the history and traditions of the rabbis, they all trace their right to priesthood to Adam, that Adam was the first one. So it's like at Satan's cursing and he was thrown down, his garments were given to Adam because he was now the high priest, what some people call the order of Melchizedek.
Order of what?
Melchizedek.
What is that?
Melchizedek was a high priest, and you first see him in the book of Genesis when Abraham defeats the 5 giant kings. These 5 kings were going through and conquering these territories and demanding tribute, and they go to Sodom and take Lot as hostage and run off with him. So Abraham assembles 300 strong men and goes after these 5 kings, and him and his crew defeat these kings and get Lot back. And on their way back, it says that they bump into this mysterious guy named Melchizedek. He was the priest and king of Salem of peace, and he give him a tithe of all the spoils. And then Melchizedek, this mysterious figure, pulls out bread and wine. And when you get into the book of Hebrews, it compares Jesus to this order of Melchizedek and the next in line. A lot of people think that this Melchizedek character was a pre-incarnate Christ or a Christophany.
Wow. So let me ask you something. And when you ask these, some people I think sometimes think I'm, this is like kind of like a tack question or something. It's not. It's a real question. So I've seen people before. I've had friends sending me these clips of people talking about this. So Lucifer is the light bearer, right? Mm-hmm. Doesn't Jesus say he's the bearer of light at one point as well?
Yeah, because Satan is always trying to mimic. When you go through some of these verses and you read Satan, he says that I will set my throne on high, and I will be the most high. He's just trying his best to be the top dog and show his superiority. And when you look at all the perverted things, it's like Satan creates nothing, but he takes things that God already has and perverts them and tries to imitate them.
Yeah, it's so interesting, right? It's super interesting. It's super interesting.
Yeah, and to back up that theory too, in the book of Joshua, Joshua was the high priest, and he is called up to heaven in a vision, and it says that Satan accuses Joshua. And when he does so, he is standing at the right hand of the throne. And I find that amazing, because when you go through the book of Revelation and you have the ascension of Christ, it says, he appeared because no one was able to open the scrolls, and he appeared as a lamb that was slain. And a lot of people think that this was, his ascension into heaven, and he came in and took the scroll. But it says that he comes at the right hand of the Father and takes the scroll. And then when you get that passage about the rebellion in heaven, and Lucifer battles the heavenly host, and his tail sweeps down a third of the stars, which people think that's the angels with him. It says plainly right there that he was swept down because there was no longer a place for him. It says that specifically. And I think that is because we went from the accuser of the brethren, the high priest at the right hand of the Father, and traded him for Jesus, who is our intercessor and defender day and night at the right hand of the Father.
So Jesus replaced Lucifer.
Yeah, because when you read Hebrews, it says that Jesus is now the high priest, and we no longer have a need for a temple or a priest, because the priests were flesh and blood and they were imperfect and couldn't do their job right. So now Jesus is in the order of this Melchizedek, and he is the perfect, high priest, the conduit to the Father.
So deep. Johnny, do you think that? Did you ever think about that?
No, never thought about that.
Did you hear about any of this?
Melchizedek? No, never came up.
It's so crazy,
that's
right?
not- yeah, no.
How deep? It's like the Bible seems like jujitsu, just a never-ending, bottomless pit of new stuff to learn about.
I mean, we weren't even given the Apocrypha in my church. That, and even the Catholic Bible was out of bounds for Southern Baptists.
And you said
That's how I was raised.
Yeah, they don't. I mean, they don't play. They don't even play in Revelation much. They don't. Revelation. They don't.
Why do you
they
think
don't-
that is, Johnny?
Well, because it's esoteric. I mean, Revelation is open to interpretation, and they don't like that very. Abstract language. They're very. They shy away from anything that leaves interpretation as an option.
So interesting.
And amazingly, that's the only book in the canon that starts out with a blessing. It says, "Blessed are those who read the words and contemplate on this book."
It kind of ends with a curse, though, doesn't it? It's
That's according on what team you're on.
But yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Keep going.
I'm just talking about literally
okay.
the last verse, where it says, "Do not add or take away or whatever, or you're going to be damned forever."
I don't even. Yeah, it's so crazy because I feel like everybody I talk to, they have their own interpretation. I guess it's interesting. Okay, keep going, dude. This is great. I'm in.
Yeah. So now I wanted to cover those garments because we see those trickle through. But Genesis 25:25 is the birth of this guy Esau that I mentioned. And right away, this sends up all kinds of question marks. It says, "The first came out red all over his body, like a hairy cloak. So they called his name Esau. Afterward, his brother came out with his hand holding Esau's heel. So his name was called Jacob." So you remember when I started it and I said, two nations were, the angel of the Lord came and said 2 nations, 2 peoples was in her womb, and they would battle, but the older would serve the younger. And according to Jewish tradition, that was completely backwards. The eldest was the one that got the birthright. He got the blessing. If he had a younger sibling, they served him. So first red flag is she gives birth to what sounds like what we would call today in our modern vernacular a Sasquatch.
Say what?
It says he came out red and covered in hair from head to toe like a hairy cloak.
Now, hold on. Who is giving birth here?
This is Rebecca.
Holy shit.
So obviously, it's the writer here is trying to show you that these are definitely 2 peoples. One comes out, covered in hair from head to toe and is red, and the other one comes out normal like us.
That is
And
crazy.
I try to point people as like, if with our modern vernacular, if we bumped into somebody that was red, covered in hair from head to toe out in the woods, without hesitation, we would say, "I seen a Sasquatch. I seen a Bigfoot."
Well,
Yeah,
Can I ask you quickly now? Are you implying that Isaac was a Sasquatch? What's the idea here? His father, right?
Well, what I'm getting at is that
Do you
Genesis
think one of his parents
3:15
were Sasquatch? Esau?
I think that Esau was a serpent seed.
From? Do you know which side it would be from? I mean,
Well, I mean, it's just Rebecca gave birth to two different types of people.
oh, I see.
Now, I'm not dogmatic. I mean, it could be spiritual, it could be physical. I mean, it doesn't say.
Okay.
Anybody that
there's
says
no
anything
implication
here
that
is
it's
just
Isaac or Rebecca.
speculative.
There's no. You're not implying that it could be Isaac or Rebecca. There's no clues.
So
to that.
Isaac got Rebecca pregnant, and she gave birth to two offspring. One is a regular person, and the other one is a Sasquatch.
Yes.
Dang, bro.
But there are no context clues about which parent it might be, because if Isaac,
No.
okay.
It just says that he was born and one was obviously different.
Wow.
But we do know, backing up to Genesis, is the curse. It says he's going to put enmity between her seed and thy seed. So it plainly says that mankind's going to have a seed, and the shining one, the serpent, is going to have a seed. And he's going to put enmity between them. And you remember in that curse, he said, your seed will crush his seed's head, but his seed's going to bruise your seed's heel. And when you get to this birth here, remember it says, after his brother came out with his hand holding Esau's heel. So, I mean, it's everything's pointing back to Genesis 3:15 and this seed war. And I thought that was, the first, just red
That's
flag.
so interesting. What do you mean by seed war?
That's what a lot of people use this terminology. Because like I said in the beginning, the parable of the wheat and the tares. And, some people talk about the reptilian race, and it's just, that there's a demonic seed amongst us. And I mean, it's biblical. It's in the scripture. And it's the seed war. It's light versus dark. It's just, that's the whole concept.
I mean, I assume you're going to get into
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, but when you go on down, you have that famous story of the trading of the birthright.
Yeah. Because I'm very curious about that.
Yeah. Now, this was something that when I first read it, I was like, what? This makes no sense to me. And the way the story goes is it says that Esau comes in exhausted from the field, from a hunt, and his brother Jacob is making red stew. And he says, give me some of that red stew. And Jacob says, only if you trade me your birthright.
Must be some good stuff.
And Esau just kind of catty says, yeah, sure, fine, take it. What use is it if I'm dead? I'm starving. Give it here.
Dang, bro. That's so dramatic.
It's hungry.
Yeah.
It's hangry. Like a Snickers commercial.
Yeah.
He's hangry,
So, like,
bro. Give me that red stew, dude.
You're not yourself when you're hungry.
Yeah,
be a
in the
great
modern
commercial.
context, that's like your dad's the millionaire of this big company, and you're the eldest son about to inherit it all. And you come in, and your younger brother, is sitting on the couch eating Doritos, and you're like, hey, bro, give me some of them Doritos. He's like, sign over the company. Yeah, sure. No.
By the way,
Something's
crackheads
missing.
do that. They sell everything at
That is true.
bargain prices.
Very bargain, yeah.
Very
Pennies
bargain.
on the dollar.
Yeah, pennies on the dollar. Dude, give me some crack.
Yeah.
Take my Bentley.
They just said it was lentil stew.
That's got to be some good stew.
Yeah, well, you find out, though, but you have to read these, what they call, extra biblical books, these, apocryphal books and things like that. And that's why I believe you don't get so much detail in some of these stories, is because either they already had this stuff written down in great detail, or in the very least, it was well established in the oral traditions. The writers assumed that this was already well known, so they didn't have to cover it. But if you go to the book of Jasher, you get the full context of this story. And so if you go to Jasher 27, it says, and Esau at that time, after the death of Abraham, frequently went into the field to hunt. And Nimrod, king of Babel, the same as Amphrio, also frequently went with his mighty men to hunt in the field, and to walk about with his men in the cool of the day. And Nimrod was observing Esau all of his days, for a jealousy was formed in the heart of Nimrod against Esau all of the days. And on a certain day, Esau went into the field to hunt, and he found Nimrod walking in the wilderness with his 2 men. And all these mighty men and his people were with him in the wilderness. But they removed at a distance from him, and they went from him in different directions to hunt. And Esau concealed himself from Nimrod, and he lurked for him in the wilderness. And Nimrod and his men that were with him did not know him. And Nimrod and his men frequently walked about in the field in the cool of the day, and to know where his men were hunting in the field. And Nimrod and his 2 men that were with him came to the place where they were, when Esau started suddenly from his lurking place, drew his sword, and hastened and ran to Nimrod and cut off his head.
Whoa!
And Esau fought a desperate fight with 2 men that were with Nimrod. And when they called out to him, Esau turned to them and smote them to death with his sword. And all the mighty men of Nimrod who left him in the wilderness heard the cry at a distance, and came to, and I'm just going to paraphrase here, but they came to run to see what was going on. But it says, before Esau escaped, it says that he removed Nimrod's garments, the garments that made Nimrod prevail over all of the land. And then it says that, and he comes home, and this is where we have, it picks up where Genesis is. It says that he came in from the field, exhausted from this exchange, and is about to die. And Jacob basically nurses him back to health so he doesn't die, and he trades his birthright to his younger brother. And that's why you get in the book, he's like, you know, do this thing, swear you'll do this thing, trade me now. And he's like, what use is it going to be if I'm dead? Take the birthright. Because he just got in a battle with Nimrod and fought to the death and killed 3 men. And it says that these men were Gibborim. And in the Hebrew, Gibborim is the same word used to describe the Nephilim giants.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And who could fight a Nephilim giant?
Hold on. Did you just go, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah?
I just heard that shit. The Nothin Giants.
Oh, really? When?
Right now.
Oh.
But right, that suggests what you're saying, right? Like, because who could take down
Esau.
Nephilim but a Yeti? You know what I mean? Like,
Sasquatch.
Well, yeah. And they were both known as mighty hunters. And I kind of jokingly said that, you know, it says in there that he was hunting Esau because he was this hairy beast of a man. He was hunting him. And both of them claimed to be the mighty hunter of the field. And it's kind of like the Highlander.
yeah, there
There can only be one, baby.
Dang,
You know,
that's crazy.
I'm going to show who the mighty man is.
That is crazy.
And these garments were the supernatural garments from the Garden of Eden that I theorized was the Nakash's coverings given to Adam. Nimrod had them, and it said that this is how he was so mighty and ruled over the nations, was because of these garments.
It's like Superman's cape.
Yeah.
That's some crazy shit, dude.
Yeah. And a lot of people were like, well, how in the hell did Nimrod wind up with them? It was supposed to be passed down through the good lineage. And once again, when you go through the book of Jasher, it traces that handing down of that birthright. That's what it was. That was the birthright. That was the symbol of authority. It was like the king's crown. And it says that it went through the good line and it traveled. And it went to Noah. And it was carried through the flood with Noah. But it says, in Ham's going out, Ham stole those garments and in secret gave them to Cush. And then Cush, it says that he gave those garments to Nimrod when he turned 20 years old, when he came of age. And it says that when he put on the garments, he became a mighty man, a Gibborim. And that's why in the book of Genesis, some people ask, it says that Nimrod wasn't born a Gibberim. It says that Nimrod became a Gibberim. And the book of Jasher attributes that to these supernatural garments from the Garden of God.
That is crazy. And so it gets passed down, passed down, passed down. Do you think that birthright is still getting passed down today?
You never know. It might be locked up in the Vatican.
Oh, man.
Among other great things.
Oh, man.
We'll always get deeper. What does the Vatican have that we don't know?
They have everything, dude. I mean, if there's a war, that's where we should all go. We'll be like...
So you say how the Bible doesn't explain things, obviously. Is that because you say it's already written down? Do you think the Vatican has those books?
If I had a big wad of money, I wouldn't be afraid to bet it on it.
So he says that the Bible doesn't explain a lot because you're assuming they don't have to because there's other books that explain that. And I'm saying, does the Vatican have those books that they talk about the Nephilim kind of just as like a side book? I'm wondering if
we know they destroyed so many books.
You think they destroyed or kept them?
Well, they probably have a private reserve, but I mean, they're responsible for destroying so much.
Just think about
literature.
that, like hiding information from society.
The government does that.
The government does that, and the Vatican does it with, you're talking about I love it. I think you're the first person to smoke on this show. I love it. I love it.
I am who I am. I ain't going to pretend.
No, dude, I think Jamie Deluxe, maybe.
Jamie Deluxe.
That's about the only other person. But I'm in, dude.
And let's not forget Mark.
Mark doesn't smoke. Well, he smokes weed.
Yeah, he smokes weed. But
not cigarettes like a grown-ass man from the 70s. That makes me think you're Nephilim. Yeah, dude, they hide all the but like, just think about this, how they've hidden all the stuff, all the supernatural stuff from the Bible, right? Just imagine, though, what else is in the Vatican, how deep that shit goes. And for me, again, why don't we ever see this in our real life? And it's because we live in these giant cities where they've just basically made everything pavement, got rid of everything. I mean, people talk about the occult in California all the time. You don't ever see any of that shit because it's all like the energy of this. You were talking about, oh man, I kind of miss LA. Like you start falling for it.
Yeah.
Like it's the energy that you don't get anywhere else.
Yeah.
It's just this giant conductor of electricity. But that stuff also keeps out all the UFOs, the Bigfoots, and all the supernatural stuff that we see. But I mean, if you go to the Bible, it's so supernatural. Imagine how supernatural the shit is in the basement, in the library of the Vatican.
I've been to the Vatican.
Yeah, but you ain't been to the library.
I know, they take you through.
What if you got lost and you're like, oh shit, I'm here?
Yeah, it's like the end of Indiana Jones, where they're just putting away one of the crates in this whole long thing of crate. Yeah, I mean, I imagine that's what it's like. I mean, we know they have professional exorcists that they don't talk about, but that we've heard little rumors of that from here and there. And then last year they talked about having standards for exorcisms.
You have to ask for permission. You have to ask the Vatican for permission to have an exorcist if you think your kid's like possessed and stuff. You don't just go to you can't just go to your random Catholic church and just be like, "Can you get the exorcist out of my kid?" No, he has to send a letter to his major, and then the major sends it to their major, and they're like, "All right, I guess he's possessed," and then they'll send a specific guy who's meant to do that.
I would love if we started seeing people who do exorcisms on like the side of buses and on like park benches. Right? Just
I'm with you. Yeah.
Are you possessed? Hit me up. 445-5559. I was possessed and then Sam got rid of the ghost. Thank you, Sam. Right?
Who are you gonna call? I'm curious. Is the stealing of the blessing part of this? Isaac's blessing? Is that?
Yeah, and that's one thing too, is because when you get to that part of the story, what happens? He tells Esau, "Go out, hunt some wild game and cook for me one last time." And he takes off to hunt. Well, then Rebekah turns to Jacob and says, "Go out and kill one of the young goats and bring it to me. I will prepare a delicious meal for your father. and you go pretend to be Esau. And Jacob's immediately afraid. He says, no, mother. He said, I can't do this. He says, I am a smooth man.
Oh,
And
snaps.
she says, do as I tell you. And he says, what if he curses me when he finds out that I've tricked him? She says, just do as I say, and if you are cursed, let your curse fall upon me. So once he goes and gets the goat, which I think is a good key descriptor, because you hear about, Pan and these satyrs, they're all described as part goat. Yeah. And then they take this goat fur and cover Jacob with it. And so Jacob goes in and goes to give his father the meal, and he reaches out and he touches him and he feels. And if you've ever felt of a goat's fur,
Whoa.
it's thick, it's oily, it's coarse.
Coarse. Yeah.
So this wasn't poetic language, his hair. No, it was literal. And then even Isaac says, oh, you even smell of the field, my son. So he even had a smell, and you hear about Sasquatch in these phantom, awful smells.
Huh. What can I ask you? Do you think his mother wanted him to get the blessing because she favored the human to the Sasquatch? Is that the idea there?
That's what I believe. Yes.
Huh. And what
she
is
knew
the blessing?
that he was not of good seed.
And is the blessing? Do you think that's something that they put import on, but not a literal thing? It was just like a spiritual blessing, like giving him his his best wishes, or was there something literal?
No, it was like it was a legal thing.
Oh,
it was almost like the signing of the will and having your eldest son take over the business. Because if you remember, after he blesses Jacob, Isaac returns from the field and he says, here, my father, I have, what you requested. Now give me my blessing. And he said, I've already give you your blessing. Oh. And he says, no, you haven't, father. And then they realize the fix was in.
Oh, snap.
That's the part I quite don't understand, though. If he already agreed to give him his inheritance, why would it also? Is this kind of like the finalization of that agreement?
Yes, because what they had was a verbal agreement, and I think it's my opinion that Esau just agreed because he was like, "Yeah, do whatever. I'm dying. Do whatever," right? Because I'm really not going to give it to you. And then when this happened, it was literally stolen out from underneath him, and it's like you're at the lawyer's office and the stamp got put on it. It's final. Because Esau starts crying. He says, Father, please, no, I'm the eldest. Give me the blessing. And he said, son, I've already done it. What's done is done. And he's like, well, do you have another blessing? Will you give me half of the inheritance or whatever? And he says, son, what is done is done.
And what do you think? I mean, because
that's crazy, bro. Sasquatch comes in.
You're suggesting, though, it sounds like that. Correct me if I'm wrong. That the Sasquatch has some kind of inherent evil, right? But it seems like the human is the one doing the deceitful stuff here.
That's a great point, Johnny.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, and that's just one of those things. It's God's will. You know what I mean? Jacob was the chosen seed, and the angel of the Lord came and told Rebekah before they were even born who the chosen seed was, and she was doing everything in her power to aid in God's plan and what the angel of the Lord told her.
Fascinating.
Wow, dude, that's crazy.
Yeah, but you see those garments in other pagan stories, because one thing I always try to look for is common themes, and it goes right along with my theory of it being the coverings of the Nakash. Do you guys remember the Golden Fleece and Jason and the Argonauts?
Yes.
Well, in that story, a man and a woman were supposed to be sacrificed to Zeus, and Athena comes and aids them to escape and sends them a golden ram that can fly, and it takes them to safety. But on the way, the woman falls and dies. And when they land in the garden of Ares, and Athena tells them to sacrifice the ram instead, and that would satisfy Zeus. So they sacrifice the ram,
Oh,
and then he
man.
takes the coverings off. He takes the golden fleece off of the ram, and they hang it on a tree in the midst of the Garden of Ares, and a great serpent guards it. And then when so there you have this ram, Ares, Satan, that is sacrificed, its coverings removed, hung on a tree, guarded by a serpent, and is the symbol of kingship and authority. And even when you go through the Bible, it says that, I'm trying to think now, when Abraham had, not Ishmael, but Isaac. Yeah, because it all comes back to Isaac. Remember, God said, sacrifice your son to me. And he agreed, and he took Isaac up and made an altar, was getting ready to sacrifice him. Then last minute, the angel of the Lord says, no, stop. And what happens? God provides a what? A ram in the thicket. And that was the substitute for the sacrifice. It goes almost parallel with the Golden Fleece story.
Dang, dude. That's some crazy. That's crazy.
And those garments are in the Bible. Your 66 book canon 2 more times, and a lot of people look over it.
Jacob.
Who remembers the seeing the Noah's nakedness, right?
Oh, yeah.
Ham
that
comes
caused
in, sees his
chaos.
father's naked. Well, that's a huge misunderstanding. And that phrase, it said he uncovered his father's nakedness. If you go to Leviticus chapter 17, it says plainly in there, to sleep with thy father's wife is to uncover thy father's nakedness. Noah got drunk and passed out, and Ham slept with his mother.
Oh boy.
And if you look at the historical texts, this was a very common practice of dominance. And it was a way that the younger rebelled and took over the household. Reuben done it. And if you look at Absalom in the Bible, which was David's son, Absalom runs David off from the kingdom. And the first thing he does is he pinches a tent on top of the house and goes into all his father's concubines in the sight of all of Israel. Ham was trying to take over the family. And then he goes and tells his brothers, hey, I just did this thing. If you go do it, he can't take on all 3 of us. And in that text, it says they take a garment, place it on their shoulders, walk backwards, and they cover their father's nakedness. They refuse. But when you look in the original language, it doesn't say a garment. It says they took the garment. It has a definite article assigned to it. So, and it goes perfect with the story because this was the symbol of authority. It was the birthright. And according to the book of Jasher, those garments were with Noah until Ham was cast out. And when he got cast out, he stole it.
So hold on. So back in the day, it would be a sign of power if you went in and banged your dad's girl,
Yep.
even if that was your mom.
Yep.
Different.
It was a way of flexing on the old man back then.
I'm gonna show you, Dad.
Yeah, she don't want the bull no more. She wants the calf.
Yeah, but it's your mom, dude. But see, this is the weirdest part because, one of the big sins is sexual deviance, right? But then that's all they did.
Mm-hmm.
That's all they did back in the day. What is this? It's so hard to follow the rules because I don't know the rules. It's just weird to me.
That's the Old Testament.
It makes the curse make a lot more sense too, because you think about it in that story, it says that he uncovered his father's nakedness. His father wakes up and he's angry and he curses Ham and says, a servant to thy brothers you shall be. And it makes sense because if he was trying to be the ruler of the household and have everybody serve him, he got the opposite. He was going to serve instead of be served. And then he curses Canaan. Canaan is Ham's firstborn son. I believe Canaan was the son of the byproduct of the incestuous union between him and his mother. Because when Noah realized that his wife was pregnant and it wasn't his, and they were naming it Canaan, he said, "Cursed be Canaan."
And she was old, right? Wasn't, or is she young?
Yeah.
She was super old, right? Wasn't that kind of, and Abraham in 100 years plus 40 or whatever that part of the Bible is, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was reading that. She was much older. That was why it was shocking, right? Didn't she try to hook up her husband with a chick and then later on she gets pregnant?
Yeah, and see that's Abraham and Sarah.
Okay.
And see that even ties into this story too, because when you trace the genealogy and the lineage of Esau, okay, once his father gives the blessing away to the younger brother, he's upset, he's mad, he goes into full rebellion. They were not to marry into the Canaanites because, going back to Noah and Ham, a curse was put upon Canaan. So he takes 2 Canaanite wives, and they were Horites and Hivites. And you just had Gary Wayne on. I'm sure he just described it in great detail, but those were known giant clans. So imagine if you're taking this hairy, quote unquote, man and breeding him with giants, you'd have a strong likelihood of throwing some really strange pups. But then, to make it even worse, he takes a 3rd wife, and his 3rd wife, he goes to Ishmael. And that's what you were talking about, Sam, because Sarah thought she was too old. So she gave Abraham her maidservant. And she was an Egyptian, not queen, but princess. And she birthed Ishmael. So Ishmael was the firstborn. He was supposed to inherit the birthright. But then later, Sarah ends up getting pregnant miraculously. And Ishmael and his mother, Hagar, are kicked out and thrown into the wilderness to fend for themselves.
Oh, man, that's just brutal.
Yep.
Yeah. So Esau, who also was the firstborn, was cheated out of his birthright, goes to Ishmael and takes his daughter. So here you have the joining of the 2 elder brothers that were screwed out of their inheritance.
So crazy.
And you can imagine the hatred that was sown in that family. You talk about, family feuds. This is it. And if you chase the genealogies, all of your Muslim nations, all of your nations and religions and people groups in the Middle East that hate Israel and just totally want to wipe out God's people off the face of the earth, all trace their lineages back from that union and to Ishmael. Once again, it's the seed war. It all goes back to Genesis 3:15.
What is one of the children, Japheth? Is that Abraham's kids?
Now Abraham had 2. He had Ishmael and Isaac.
Oh, okay. So who is Abraham's father?
Abraham's father was Terah. He was the idol maker for Nimrod.
So the Abrahamic religions come from Abraham, right?
Yes.
And then did Abraham have 2 brothers? Ham and Japheth? Is that how it goes?
No, Abraham had one other brother that is written down anyway, and I can't remember his name, but he ends up dying, but he has a son named Lot. And that's why Abraham takes Lot, his nephew, under his wing, because his brother was dead.
You're thinking about the sons of Noah, Sam.
Yeah, the sons of Noah. That's what I'm thinking of. There we go.
Shem, Ham, and Japheth.
Japheth, right? And is that where the Ashkenazis come from, in your opinion?
That I've not really took a deep dive in Japheth's lineage.
We have a Khazarian right here.
Yeah, I'm half Ashkenazi.
You are half Ashkenazi. All right. Interesting.
And the Khazarian theory makes sense to me. I read the 13th tribe, and that seems to make sense to me.
Yeah. Adam Green has a problem with it, and he has some interesting takes on that as well. Man, this is great stuff. What else do you got, dude? This is really good stuff.
But yeah, you have that. So, and what's really interesting to me is Esau, from his marrying of the Hittites, the giant clans, his nephew that comes out of that is this guy named Amalek. And an entire giant tribe is named after this guy, the Amalekites. And in Hebrew, his name literally means the blood lickers.
What?
Oh.
So that shows you these were cannibalistic, sorcery type people that was into witchcraft and things like that. So when you go into Exodus, when Moses is leading his people through the wilderness, Esau's, one of his father-in-laws of the giant clans, was this guy named Seir, and their land was in the wilderness around this mountain, and they called Mount Seir. Well, in Hebrew, Seir means hairy. So when Moses takes his people to the wanderings of the wilderness, that's when you get all your do not do this, do not do that. Well, in those, I think if we look at some of those, it's telling of the people that they encountered in their wanderings. It says, do not drink the blood, the life forces in the blood. Do not seek necromancers. Do not seek sorcerers or mediums. And it says, no longer will you sacrifice to hairy goat demons. And then in the book of Isaiah, it talks about these cursed cities, and it says the satyrs will dance. And the first people that they encounter in their wilderness wanderings, they're attacked by them. And it is the Amalekites, these blood lickers. So it's my opinion that while they were in their wanderings, they had encounters with these hairy Nephilim tribes. And these tribes were sorcerers. They were necromancers. They sacrificed children. They drank blood.
Damn.
And did all these things. And God's people were seeing it. And they were starting to copy them. And that's why God had Moses give these commands to not do this, not do that, because that's the way of the heathen. That's what these, Nephilim giant clans, the Amalekites, were doing, and they were starting to do it themselves. And once again, common themes. If you go through history, you have Krampus. What does Krampus do? He's this hairy-looking demonic beast, and he abducts children. And Molech, it talks about sacrificing their children, putting children through the fire. Well, if you go down to Sardinia, they have this thing at the winter solstice, and they have these guys called the Methones or the Methanes. They take goat fur and wrap themselves head to toe in it like hairy beasts. They carve these wooden masks and put over their face, and then they cover their back and shoulders with bells. And the whole town does this, and they march through the streets in these costumes.
Yes.
And they dance and shake the bells, and then they abduct women from the crowd and take them. And then during this festival, just like Molech, the kids that are coming of age, they have a huge fire, and the kids, as like their test to coming into adulthood, have to run and jump through the fire. So once again, going back to these Nephilim giant clans and the Molech worship and passing the children through the fire.
Yes, dude. We had a guy come on talking about how Nephilim look like clowns. Clowns are Nephilims.
Oh, yeah, Paul.
Yeah.
Love Paul.
And he said the exact same thing about that. And that they're still celebrating these Nephilim right now. I'm telling you, bro. The Nephilim thing is like the genesis to everything. The fallen angels is the genesis to everything. Every conspiracy goes far back to that. And then you just listen to this stuff. It's like so crazy to me, dude. It's just crazy. Yeah. And how they get rid of all that stuff in the like what made it into the Bible, what did make it into the Bible. What are your thoughts on that? What makes it into the Bible versus what didn't?
Yeah, they're covering this stuff up for sure.
It's so interesting, dude.
Honestly, when you look at the Bible itself, it was a bunch of different scrolls and writings. They're just all spread out, and it was shared amongst the people. And then when Constantine united all of his, countries into, one body or one government, he wanted to unify the people under one religion. And he had just converted to Christianity, but the Jews had a book, they had the Torah, but Christianity didn't have a book. So he wanted a book. And at this same time, you had the Gnostics running around, and they were writing their own gospels too. And they were the ones saying that Jesus Christ was just a regular man, but he, through knowledge and through gnosis, ascended to Christ consciousness, and Mary was his girlfriend, and they had sexual relations and had kids. And at the same time, they were drinking these kookions and mixing these psychedelic drinks and having, home churches and having all these vision quests and experiences. And they were starting to infiltrate the church. And that's what it talks about, the wolves in sheep's clothing. And you read the writings of Arnelius and all these, early church fathers, they talk about these guys. They were infiltrating the church and basically just telling the people, hey, they're talking about Moses and Abraham and all these people seeing God. And they're talking, about this, that, and the other and all these visions, but we're actually doing this stuff over here. They're hiding this. They're hiding the truth from you. Meet us, at such and such's house at such and such time, and we'll show you the truth. And they were reading all these Gnostic gospels to them and feeding them these psychedelic drinks, going back to these Dionysian cults. It all goes back to that, the road to Eleusis. And they were drinking these drinks and having these spiritual, trips and visions. So Constantine was like, we have this heresy moving through the church. We have mass confusion. We don't have a book. So in 325 AD, he put together the Council of Nicaea, and they all got together and compiled all of the scrolls and books that were floating around, and they voted and put together what we know today as the 66 book canon. So there was a lot of stuff that didn't make the cut, and they say it's as simple as, if they couldn't prove who the author was, it didn't make it into the Bible. And some people said, how it's been whitewashed so much that if it was supernatural or it was beyond their...
And we had him.
Oh,
We lost him.
Come on, he's cooking with gas.
No.
He's cooking with gas.
He was about to tell us where all the books,
Just-
where all the good stuff was at.
Whenever we get to the true stuff, that's when it just shuts down.
What was the last thing you heard?
What was the last thing we heard?
The canon.
If
the
they
canon.
couldn't prove who wrote the book, it didn't make the cut.
Yeah, that's where.
Okay. Yeah, I said, if they couldn't prove who wrote the book, it got denied. And some people say if it went above their reasoning, supernatural, that it didn't make the cut. It was just Constantine basically just wanted a book together to show the history of Christianity, which was the Torah, and then the New Testament was the overall arching theme of Christ and salvation and the spreading of the gospel to the known world.
Super interesting, dude.
And the book of Jasher, that's like, was that found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, or how do we get access to that?
The book of Jasher was not, but the book of Jasher is mentioned in other books that was in the canon and in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So we know from those that there was a book of Jasher.
Okay.
But a lot of people have argued that the book we have now is like a much later rendition. But I'm of the opinion that, even if it is a later rendition, that this was something that was oral tradition passed down through the people, and that was well known, because it honestly, it dovetails and ties in to the Bible so perfectly. And I'm one of these guys, I ain't dogmatic, but I do look at these other books, but I filter them through Scripture, and I see how they line up with Scripture. And if they don't contradict, but they just fill in gaps and things like that, I will accept them and put them in just to see how it interweaves into the narrative, much like the Book of Enoch, or the Book of the Watchers, rather.
It's interesting, dude. The whole thing is interesting. I always ask God, please just tell me what the truth is, because there's so many layers upon layers upon layers of it. You know, when people talk about they have a problem with religion, don't you find that they tend to mean Christianity?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Is that crazy, dude? And like they tend to be like, when they try to go, "You're God, you're God." Do they ever do that to Hasidic Jews?
No. But Christianity is the straight white male of religions.
It really is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the spiritual warfare that's attached to it. Honestly, you can talk about Muhammad, you can talk about Buddha, the Native Americans just, say the creator. It doesn't matter. You can talk about any god you want on social media, out in public, whatever. There's never a problem, never an issue. But as soon as you mention, Jesus or Christ, Jesus Christ, it's like people lose their minds.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I think it's just, once again, it's these Deuteronomy 32, these spiritual wickedness in high places that we battle not against flesh and blood, Paul talks about, that's going on. It's that spiritual Game of Thrones. It's like the King of Tyre. It's the entity behind these people pulling the strings that gets triggered at that name.
It's so interesting when I just go by my feel. When I feel like I'm trying to connect with God and do God's bidding, I just feel better about myself. When I'm when you're on drugs and you're middle of nowhere, you're going to Glendale Mall to fucking steal fucking cologne so you could sell it, right? I mean, like, to me, it's crazy, right? It's just, I don't know, man. And it's like it's like there's so many people out there that are pushing back, that are just doing dark shit. That it has to make you believe in God. Unless you believe this entire place is just darkness.
Yeah, I agree. And before we let you go, Sam, I do want to tell you this, because this is something, too, that when I found out, it really blew my mind, was you guys remember Joseph in the Bible and the coat of many colors?
Yeah, technically, yeah.
And remember that was, Isaac through Jacob, and Jacob to Joseph. I think that coat of many colors is this garment that we've been talking about today. And archaeologists have recently found, I talked to David Roll, and he did an episode with me called Question the Egyptian Timeline and the Biblical Joseph. Because Joseph, he had this coat of many colors. And it says that, just like Nimrod, that his father loved him exceedingly, and he was the child of his old age that he loved exceedingly, and was given this garment. So you have these common themes with the verbiage and how that's explained in that story. But the brothers, rip the garment off of him and soak it in blood and trade him off to traders that are heading to Egypt. And he goes back and tells his father Jacob that Joseph, was tore apart by a wild boar, or an animal. So he goes, and everybody knows the story of Joseph. But archaeologists had recently found this ancient city called Avaris. And it was a known Semite settlement. And Semite is just another word for, Hebrew, Semitic people, Jewish people. And that they found this, like, statesman, someone important, this huge house in the middle of Avaris, and it had a small pyramid temple, and only high officials and kings were buried in these pyramids. And it said they dug it up and that the tomb was empty. But in there, they found this huge statue that was busted into pieces. Someone had took a hatchet or a hammer and just beat this thing into pieces. And they put it back together, and they said that the skin was yellow, that Egyptians didn't paint their statues and stuff yellow. That was a Semitic thing. And it said that his hair was bright red, and on his shoulder they found a coat of many colors. And that they strongly believe that that was the tomb of Joseph, because when Moses led the people out of Exodus, the first thing they done was, it said they took the bones of Joseph back with them to bury into the promised land.
Crazy stuff, dude. Crazy.
You know what else is crazy? You
Yeah.
type in coats of many colors on Google, and you would assume the Bible shows up, right? Nope, Dolly Parton.
Dolly Parton.
That's
Google.
the first
She
thing.
is
You
spiritual.
literally- Yep.
Those
you
tits are spiritual. Those are spiritual tits, dude.
Oh,
Still saucy.
You got to take your hat off when you say Dolly's name.
Yeah, come on, take your hat off. This come from a guy who's wearing a Black Hawk hat.